everyone. On this episode of Teeter Talks, I chat with Greg Stewart. He's a two-time gold medal winning Paralympic athlete in shot put, but he's also on a mission to empower the leader in all of us. Sound familiar? We are so aligned and we have such great conversation, from talking about vulnerability to being comfortable, being uncomfortable, imposter syndrome, and everything in between. This is a great chat you're not going to want to miss. Please enjoy Greg Stewart. Hey, Greg, welcome to Teeter Talks.
Good morning.
How are you? I mean, I know you've already spilt one coffee on yourself this morning. How are we doing with that second coffee?
We have a Breville coffee machine.
Ooh, fancy.
It is fancy, yet we have no idea how to use it. So it's a super fancy coffee machine, but it's like you got to get the grind right, you got to get the amount right, you got to get the pressure right, you got to make sure you're dependent on the bean. I could go on for a long time about how hard it is to make a coffee. And so, you know what? Today, the second one, it's really good. So,
well, you enjoy that coffee. You deserve it, since you probably have second-degree burns on your body as a result of spilling the first one. But you're talking to someone who just likes plain good old-fashioned drip coffee. Like, just if it's too fancy, I can't do it. So we're on opposite ends of that coffee spectrum, Greg.
Oh, that's all good. It's all good.
All good. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because I didn't meet you, but we were at the same event earlier this year. It was the Can Fund Gala. I was being recognized as a Be Epic woman. I was recognized. I was given an award. It was such an honor. But they had Olympic athletes and Paralympic Canadian athletes there who were telling their stories. They're supporting the cause. For those of you who don't know, Can Fund is the single largest supporter and funder, not-for-profit, for our Canadian athletes. It costs a lot of money to be an athlete and to get to the Olympics, and they do such great work supporting athletes. I've spoken about them before. I've had other Can Fund athletes on this podcast, so I'm a big supporter of that cause and the amazing work that they do. And at this gala, I saw you from across the room, mainly because you're very hard to miss. You are 7'2". Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. So I was there with a group of friends and we played this fun game. It goes, what sport do we think that guy plays? Because you were so tall, you stood up. Don't get me wrong, there were a lot of tall people there, a lot of tall athletes. And as luck would have it, I actually guessed right. I guessed that you were a shot putter. And I guess I just assumed you threw things like axes, hammers, other things of that nature. So I landed on shot putting, and I was right, because they then announced you told a beautiful story of your journey. And you announced that you were, at that time in February, you were the reigning gold medal champion from the previous Summer Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. So I was pretty proud of myself. But then you went on to win gold again this summer. So you are actually a two-time gold medalist in the Paralympic shot put. And I want to talk about that. What does it feel like to win a gold medal at the Paralympics, not once, but twice?
Well, we're only 2 months away since that happened. So
That's
attaching
crazy.
a feeling to it, I think, will be challenging because there are still a lot of feelings going on. I will tell you the 2 days leading up to the competition were extremely uncomfortable feelings, far more uncomfortable than my competition in Tokyo. But I don't know, when you go out and do something that you really enjoy and you just go out there and have fun, that is what's the most important piece, at least in my eyes. And so if I was to say, like, how does it feel to be a two-time Paralympic champion? Like, it feels good. I'm not going to say it feels normal or anything like that, because I don't even know what normal is. But it feels right. It feels connected. It feels loving. It feels like a good place to start and continue to use as a platform to, continue to support myself and other people. So there's my long-winded, how's it feel?
Well, it's really well articulated. In fact, in an interview that I watched that you did, I think with CBC, you talked about having a moment where you were afraid to win gold again going into these Summer Olympics, where you would have to process your greatness again. And I think a lot of people are really uncomfortable with their greatness, especially when it's on I mean, not too many of us have to process it on a world stage or a national stage of that nature, but maybe elaborate on what you mean by that in terms of having to process your greatness and the fear that came with. Was it living up to the hype? Was it, everything culminating to this one moment? What was it exactly?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm a pretty confident person. I would say that I've done a lot of work on my mental health to ensure that I feel good on a regular basis. Um, I would say like overall I'm in content. Like I'm happy with who I am.
Mm.
But our mind does a phenomenal job of playing tricks on us.
Oh, yes.
And I would say one of the things that I suffer with would be, I'm sure you've heard it, imposter syndrome. And it's just like that feeling of not recognizing or not being grateful for your actions and your contributions that you've given to yourself and the world around you.
Hmm.
And the fear of greatness um, hits me really hard. And I think it's for two reasons. One, because I'm very large. Um, I feel that my height and my size can be very intimidating. And I think right now, our society, we're still very focused on, there's a level of like arrogance when you're too showboaty or you're showing your greatness too much.
Hmm.
Social media, all this kind of stuff, there's all these things that we think, you know, success or greatness looks like. And so I think there's a part of me that's fearful of showing my greatness because that's not me, right? It's not showboating. It's not, you know, this money and this wealth and this success and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I'm fearful of showing my greatness because it will be attached to that.
Hmm.
Where my greatness is more attached to the fact of just I'm comfortable with who I am. I love who I am. Um, I love the work that I put into myself so that I can create greatness around me. And it just becomes really like overwhelming. But it also just recognizes that it takes a lot of work. And I think that's where my imposter syndrome comes from is just like, oh no, you got to put more work in. You got to do this again. There is no stopping and smelling the roses or the daisies. It's like, let's continue to put in the hard work. So I think that's one piece of it. But then the flip side for me is I'm born missing my left arm below the elbow. And the piece that might be holding me back is I'm disabled. How can a disabled person be great? Right? We have this view of people with disabilities, people being different and with that a lesser than approach. And so I have these two things that are constantly battling back and forth, my size, my height, which is an advantage to everyone's view, yet I have this disadvantage of my arm and I'm just constantly battling. Can I actually be great? And so when we were leading up to competing in Paris, like I said, the mind plays wicked tricks on us. All the work that we had done, expectations, poked their head through, and I felt worthless. I was
Hmm.
like, I'm not good enough to be here. I can't do this. I can't show them my greatness again. You're not worthy of it. But I'm grateful that there's help. There's people around, my coach, my wife, my parents, our sports psych. There's people that we can talk to and have these conversations with. And it's something lately that I've learned is Penny, our sports psych, she helped push me over the cliff. Um, and I think there's a real importance and the figurative, metaphorical look at like being pushed over the cliff. That's the important piece. Because when we're standing at the ledge, we don't want to jump, or we do want to jump, and people are bringing us back. But we have to express them. We have to feel them. So give us that push so that when we hit the bottom, we've experienced it, we've moved through it, and we
Hmm.
moved on. And so all of that work, all that support pushed me over, been like, hey, imposter syndrome, I see you, I feel you, I'm done with you. And then I woke up the next day, the day to compete, and it was like, game on, let's go. And so it's really interesting. It's a very great question. And of course, I go in depth to it because it matters,
Yeah.
but it's um, being aware of how we view ourselves is a very important thing.
You just said about 50 things that I'd like to circle back on. I'll start with this idea of being afraid to show our greatness. I do think there's this weird balance or game or waltz we do in life where, by celebrating something or being proud of our greatness somehow, to your point, makes us arrogant or showboaty. And how do you balance that in this very kind of social media world that we live in? When I want to post something because I'm proud or excited, be it proud of myself or someone else, I also don't want to make it seem like I'm showing off. And as I launched my own company and had to become the face of the brand, and I asked people who are successful in various ways, who are the face of their brand. I mean, you're the face of your brand. When you have to put yourself out there and promote your accolades or demonstrate your skills and abilities to serve in whatever way you want to, whatever business or platform you've created, there's a lot of self promotion that happens, and you got to get comfortable with that. I just posted something on Instagram recently that just said, if you're not comfortable with your greatness, nobody will be, right? So you have to find a way to lean into it and find that balance. And I also think, as a mom of two young kids, and they're so drastically different. I have a son who has the confidence of a million men, and I have a daughter who, is much more timid and quiet, but she has her moments where she's in front of the mirror, feeling good, doing her thing. And, there's this one side of me that's like, okay, well, I got to manage her, manage the ego. And there's other part of me that thinks, my gosh, the world is going to beat confidence out of these children. So let these kids, be them, throw it out there, showboat, be confident. They play sports, they do the celebrations. Like, let them have that moment. There's a time and a place, certainly, and we'll teach them that. But, as you get older, that confidence, that how we see ourselves changes. And then imposter syndrome, it's very ironic because I am currently drafting my next newsletter. And it's all about this idea of imposter syndrome. And really, this idea is that you don't have to believe every thought that's in your head. You can let things move through your mind. You can have these thoughts come and go. You don't have to make them your truth. And it's so amazing to hear you talk about greatness because let's go there now. You didn't really accept that you were disabled until you were about 25, you told me. That you kind of fought the idea. You played able-bodied sports. I mean, you were a decorated basketball player in able-bodied basketball for years, and then something switched in you. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I think, were you fighting it? Were you avoiding it? Did you just not identify that way? Or was there something that maybe on the flip side spoke to you as identifying as someone with a disability?
The long story short is my parents decided to treat me like I was an able-bodied person,
Hmm.
and which honestly, like, fantastic, mom, dad, thank you, because we one thing a lot of people just don't recognize is that we are in our current situation in our lives based on the choices and the decisions we've made. So don't judge yourself for it. Like, you are here based on of the emotional reactions and responses that you've had that have got you to here. Like, you are perfect, you're doing an amazing job, continue to do it. Change how you're approaching all of that. And if you're not changing that, well, you're going to have the same outcome and the same experiences. So my parents, I have an older brother, Wade. When I was born, right away, okay, Greg has one arm. How do we approach this? I don't know what to do. Well, then we're just going to treat him like Wade. We're going to just treat him like our other son because really he is no different to us, which is fantastic. But just over the time, there's a piece of me that was always kind of like, I don't quite feel fulfilled,
Hmm.
or I feel like something is missing. And what was missing is I didn't feel a sense of belonging. My wife and I have this conversation often about what is belonging and what is fitting in, because those are two very,
Hmm.
very separate things. And one kind of comes from like an egotistical place, and one comes from like a more divine, loving place. Up until 25, I was trying to prove to people that I was good enough, that I'm worthy. Multiple times when I played university basketball, trying to quit because I was just like, I don't feel good. This isn't right. I hate what I'm doing. But I learned a lot of really valuable lessons through that process. One of the quotes I quote all the time from my coach was, learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's like, yes, you're right. Like, if you want to grow, there's no growth in comfort. And even though I struggled and I didn't want to be a part of it, but I did very well at it, I never felt value. I never felt a sense of fulfillment because I was so busy trying to prove to people that I belonged within that group. But you don't belong within a group, you belong within yourself. Because when you can create a sense of belonging within you, then you can create, and this is the conversation my wife and I always have, is like, if we're belonging within, we're belonging around everything else, or we're fitting into the places where we want to fit in. And so going back to greatness, when you can identify and feel that level of, I belong internally, I love myself, I love the things that I do I have gratitude, I have thanks, all that, then we can experience greatness, because greatness, everything comes from within. Because you have $1 million doesn't mean you're great, because you can be not a nice person with $1 million. If you love yourself and you're grateful for yourself and you just show it, and it comes from a place. So this is the other part. And this is the part that I think often gets confused, is what's the difference between showboating and being like loving? Is the way it feels, but I can't see how it feels with you. But if you can say, if you're like, I have $1 million, but the way that I process it, the way I feel it, you will be able to feel it. But if it's coming from like an egoic place, and it has like a lot of like, excitement's not the word, but it's got like a high level of energy and discomfort in it, it's probably not coming from the right place.
Yeah.
And so I just lost my train of thought there. I was on a roll, but yeah, here we go.
No, I like what you're saying, because I think a lot of times we know exactly where we want to be and how we want to feel. But, and again, this goes back to imposter syndrome, this feeling of living up to greatness, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if you don't buy your own hype, if it doesn't feel right with you, it's not going to feel right with anybody else. And there's this word authenticity that I think gets used too much and overused and in the wrong context. But in this context, I think you got to figure out what makes sense to you. And I talk about the definition of success all the time with guests on this podcast. We talk about the definition of, I've had a VP of high performance for, an NHL team on here. He's a sports scientist. All these things are about perspective. And there's always going to be someone greater who performs better, who is, more successful, who et cetera, et cetera. But it's really how you're feeling on the inside. What is your own definition? What do you identify with? What feels right to you? Because it feels icky with you, it's going to feel icky with other people. That's the thing, is that these things eventually show up. So I do want to go back to your childhood a little bit, because I think there's something beautiful about your parents. And again, as parents, we never know the right thing to do. This is the problem, right? We just we kind of go
It's
with
not
our
a
guts.
problem. It's
Yeah,
not a problem. It's, you're, like I said, you're doing exactly what you know how to do.
right.
And the thing that I don't have kids yet. We're planning for them down the road. But one of the things that I'm excited about, and I heard this quote, is that you're not um, you're not teaching your kids, you're learning from them. Because if you think about when your child is born to like 10, 11 years old, remember that time for you. You were learning, but you weren't consciously aware that you were learning. So now you are in that place where you're consciously aware,
Yeah.
and now you get to learn from them.
It's so true, because you don't know you're going to be in the situations. Everything's learning on the fly. Everything's learning on the go, making the best decision, pardon me, that you can with the information that you have based on your child, their personality, their reactions, because that's the other thing. Your children are not the same either. And I strongly believe you have to parent differently because they need you to show up differently. But it's really amazing that your parents took a path that served you and decided to treat you as able-bodied. And then you turn 25 and you decide, no, I really identify, feel a sense of belonging as a person with a disability. And then what? You decide to explore sport in a different way?
I'll go back. I didn't like turn 25 and be like, I'm disabled.
Okay.
It wasn't quite
This
like
is the
that.
day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what? I'm feeling something. No, I got help.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny. I'm applying for a master's in counseling right now, and
Oh, congrats.
I've been doing a lot of I have to do like a letter of intent. So I'm just looking back at my life and how I approached certain things and looking at my grades, and I was like, oh, I did very, very bad in my last year of university. And I did really bad because in 2012, 2011, when I finished basketball, I attached to that. And I attached to the fact that I'm a basketball player, not a student. So then
Right.
my last year was 2012. I almost failed because I didn't have a sense of fulfillment. I didn't know who I was. And that's when I started to go downhill and being like, okay, like something is not right here. Um, and so that's when I stepped into group therapy. And I did that for 6 months. It was a 6 months personal empowerment training with breath integration here in Kamloops. It was like twice a week. It's like 250, 300 hours of how do I feel? Which is like, it's funny. Last night, I was like, if I ever had an interview with somebody or I was giving a talk, I would have like a small piece where somebody plays a role as a counselor and then I would be on the other side. And people would be like, how you feel? Be like, I don't have a clue how I feel. What are you talking about? Right. Well, that's how it started,
Yeah.
to a point where I remember I like stood up on a chair because my like fear around being too big. Well, I stood on a chair to really be big, to really accept the fact that this is who I am.
Yeah.
And so at the end of my personal empowerment training, I finally felt this sense of fulfillment. I'm like, wow, I am me. I'm what matters. And when I can see what matters, I can see what matters outside of me. And I was going to make this comment earlier, just something to think about in terms of authenticity. So I'm
Mm.
going to give you an example. We're going to virtually try this, okay? So Marissa, I have this coffee, okay?
Yes. I'm
If
jealous.
I if I were to give you this coffee and we're in the same room, you could take it from me, right? So I own the coffee, you now own the coffee, we own the coffee. If I don't have a coffee in my hand and I'm like, hey, Marissa, take the coffee, well, you can't take it.
Mm.
But I can say that I gave you the coffee. Same thing applies with, hey, I don't practice love. I don't seek counseling. I don't do anything that makes me feel better, yet I love you. Explain to me how that works.
Right.
If you
How
want
could
to be,
you?
yeah,
Yeah.
how can you be authentic if you don't own it?
If you don't
We have all
embody it,
these
if you aren't it.
we have all these
Yeah.
people that I will love them, I will love them. What are you doing to love yourself? Nothing. Okay, well, what are you giving them then? Are you giving them your insecurities, your faults, your fears, your guilt? Like, what are you giving them? And you're right. I think authenticity is thrown all over the place. I think we need to change authenticity to ownership
Hmm.
and
I
own the
like that.
things that we are using, that we are doing in our lives, so that when we own the fact that we screwed up, that is a level of authenticity. We are now owning the fact that we screwed up, and we're going to give to the person, they're going to see the fact that we took ownership of it. And what typically happens is they're going to start taking ownership. because I own it and I possess it. So sorry, I had to throw that out there because I think often
Yeah.
people don't recognize it. So
That's a great example. And I think you hit the nail on the head for me. I think I struggle with authenticity without accountability. I think that's the piece that I find hard. People say they're one thing, they put it out there, but it's not, you can tell that it's not in alignment with who they actually are behind the scenes. And, there's wonderful things about social media and we can pick on it all day long, but the wonderful thing is that you can show up how you want to show up and what feels right to you. But my hope for people is that the way you're showing up is actually how you feel, that you actually are as happy as you seem and you actually are as fulfilled as you are portraying. That's a tricky, balance for a lot of people. But I want to go back to this
yeah, sorry.
little bit of a transition that you were
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
because you
yeah.
didn't just flip the
25.
switch when you were 25, but you talked about a really important moment when people go through these transitional times. I think there's a lot of young people out there who are finishing up their college university years and probably have some sort of and I'm going to use you know a technical term, which perhaps is also overused, this idea of having an identity crisis, right? I identified as a university student. My purpose was to just go to school, but now I have to go into the real world. Who am I? What do I stand for? What do I want to do? These natural transition periods. I mean, we see them during career changes. We see them when people go into retirement. It's like, how do I identify in this new chapter in my life? And it just sounded like everything came to kind of a culminating moment where you were in a transition. You had to really look yourself in the mirror and figure out, what do I want? Who am I? What do I stand for? And I mean, good for you for going to counseling and being in that group session. It sounds like you got so much out of it. And I know you've now made a career out of taking these learnings and sharing them with other people, but your ability to be vulnerable and tap into you and your wantingness to share that is such a rare gift. I have to say, like I know you show up as a big guy at 7'2", and people are not expecting you probably to talk about your emotions and help other people talk about theirs. But I think there's really something powerful because you do. I love that you've married that mind and body as an athlete to show how important it is to be good on the inside and on the outside. So yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more, as we build on that. So you went to therapy and you probably had a little bit in the way of self-discovery and decided that you were going to move in a direction. What direction did you decide to move in after your therapy work?
I decided to move in the direction of love,
Yeah.
right? What is the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? Imagine asking yourself that question on a regular basis, or at least maybe not on a regular basis, but just tuning in to being like, does this serve me? Does it not serve me? What is the reality behind that? What is the emotion that is controlling the situation? Right? Just imagine if we took that moment to stop, take a deep breath and be like, okay, I'm scared. Okay, why am I scared? Okay. Now, I'm not saying I did that every time because 100% I'm still a human being. I overreacted multiple times. But if I was willing to go back in and look at it and maybe make some adjustments or be like, hey, I don't want to feel this way anymore. How do I approach it? That's what the shift was, is that I was willing to give myself, I guess, more time to understand my surroundings, to understand my environment. And another sidetrack, counseling is not for when things are hard. Counseling, we go to counselors when things are good
Yes.
because we
Prehab.
talk 100%,
Yeah.
because we talk about when situations can be challenging, and then we are taught the tools and giving the tools or given the tools to understand that situation, so that when we experience it, we know how to get through it. And then when things become even more challenging, we still have that person to connect with.
Yeah.
I have been going to my counselor since 2014. I've been seeing one for 10 years. And when I was training for Tokyo and everything like that, I would see her every 2 weeks for like 4 years. Now I see her every month. Um, and I do it out of pocket. And I say that, and I'm not saying it to be arrogant or anything like that. I'm saying it because
It matters.
we will go, well, it matters, but money is a really challenging conversation for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And yet investment, we go to the gym, we try to eat healthy, we do yoga, we do all these things that definitely help us get better and teach us and grow and everything like that. But then when we ask ourselves, well, how do I give to myself, like practicing my mental health? Nothing's talked about. No money's invested. And like, I would say my biggest investment is me, right? A
Yeah,
counselor's not cheap. I think they're like $150 an hour these days,
at least, yeah. But
right?
but to your point, it's an investment, and when you're looking at your overall health, somehow that tends to get overlooked in a lot of cases. Even things like sleep. Sleep is such a big part of your overall health, and most people are sacrificing their sleep, not realizing it's such a key proponent of overall wellness. But I'm always amazed at, well, I should say I'm grateful that these days the stigma around counseling and therapy, I think, is lessening. I think it's much
Totally.
more widely accepted, especially when we're talking about high performance. And we can talk about the physical side of it, but you cannot ignore the mental side of performance in whatever capacity. As an athlete, as a business person, as a parent, you want to show up as your best. That takes mind and body. And so I suspect your investment in your mind is what allowed you to discover this opportunity to invest in your body and to use it to, you know, chase dreams and test yourself. And I don't know if
100%.
you weren't in the right mindset, you probably would never have allowed yourself to consider the path of Olympic greatness, if you will.
Absolutely. I think about that often. I'm like, would I have been this successful as a Paralympian if I didn't practice this? And the answer is no, this wouldn't happen, period. Because I would still be trying to prove to people of my value, of my worth. And I would probably guarantee you I would never be throwing a shot put
Hmm.
because I would just be in that discomfort all the time of not feeling good enough, having the world feeling like they owe me, right? Don't get me wrong, I still feel that every once in a while, but that's
I
only
think that's
that's only
normal. Yeah,
human,
I
yeah.
think that's normal.
um,
But what a good lesson, because I think no matter people's backgrounds, I mean, I'm sure we don't have a huge audience of Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes here, although I know we have a few. There's just such an important message here to make sure your mind is right. If you need, there's just no way life's going to work out the way you want to unless you've done the work on yourself. And how you see yourself, how you see your journey, how you approach life is 100% going to manifest itself to a certain. You can hide for a bit, you can fake it. And again, I don't want to get into how I feel about the "fake it till you make it" sentence, because I struggle with that one a little bit. Because eventually, like, when do we flip the switch? When do we stop faking it? How do we know we've made it?
mhm.
I think, we'll save that one for a rainy day, but I really think we have to buy into ourselves and get behind ourselves and do whatever it takes to get there mentally in order to show up in the best way that we possibly can. And, hopefully people find outlets to be able to do that.
Absolutely. How often are we like, oh, it's 80-20, 80% mental, 20%
Yeah.
physical? I The more I practice this, the more I've realizing it's 100% mental, period.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have friends who run marathons, and I'm thinking, 99% of the battle is just telling your body not to stop.
Hmm.
Is telling, or training is telling yourself not to put that food in your mouth, or to put that food in your mouth, or to put your running shoes on and go. It's really your mindset. And if you can get your mind to get behind your hopes and dreams and your goals, your body, I think, will follow, which is the crazy part.
Well, you can't get your body to move forward without taking a step, but you have to tell your body to take a step.
Yeah. If anyone's had a toddler, They know exactly. No, the toddler is not moving if they don't want to. If you could drag them kicking and screaming, their body's not moving if their mind doesn't want them to. You'll learn this one day, Greg, when you
Yeah,
have
I know.
children. So,
I The
yeah,
amount of times I
it's
look at kids
true.
in grocery stores and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's pretty
It's not
amazing.
all bad.
Oh
It's not all bad.
yeah.
No, but I think it's so true. I mean, we could get our body to do something if our mind wants to, but there's no chance we can get our mind to do something. Sorry, we can get, or if our bodies want to do something, our mind can get it to do it. But if our mind doesn't want to do it, there's no way our body can get us to do it. So
It's like
I
early
think
morning
that's,
training sessions. Who likes
yeah.
to get up early in the morning? I know there's people that do. I'm not a big fan of it. I was supposed to go swimming this morning, but I'm like, I am too tired.
Hmm.
And then the judgment was, well, you better go. You're supposed to go. And it's like, can I be softer on myself today? Can I give myself permission to be like, hey, if you get in trouble or something like that, you're going to learn about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to move through it and move on. But I think today it's important that you sleep.
Yes.
But there's a
Yeah.
fine line on, okay, well, what's sleeping versus I got to push myself to do it. And that word gentle, which we don't use, is so paramount to how we treat ourselves. We need to learn to treat ourselves with a sense of gentleness. Because the more
With the
gentle we
way we
can
treat
be.
other people. Like, why don't we treat ourselves the way we treat other people?
Okay, so I got to share. So yesterday I gave a talk to a school,
Oh, yeah.
and awesome. It was a small community just outside of Kamloops where I'm from. There was like 80 kids, K to 12. So it's
Oh,
challenging. How do you talk to a kindergartner? How do you talk to a grade 12 in the same room?
right.
But one thing that happened to me, and it happens often, is when I show them that I can tie my shoes. 9 times out of 10, everyone claps. I get a
Oh,
round of applause for tying my shoes, but they're applauding me because I'm doing it with one arm. Imagine what the world would be like if we gave a round of applause to everybody for their differences. Think about how incredible the world would be. Think about how much direction we would be moving in terms of inclusion and feeling a sense of worthiness and a sense of belonging. If we could acknowledge and share how happy we are about how amazing you are, man, life would be pretty amusing. And sorry, I had to share that because I'm like talking about our
oh,
differences, and I'm
yeah.
like, I got applauded for tying my shoes,
Nobody applauds for me when I tie my shoes. So, yeah,
right? But
it's,
because that seems normal.
yeah.
But I guarantee there's something that you do differently that we just don't give recognition for. We do. You're doing it right now. We are having a podcast. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about the importance of being you and everything like that. You are being vulnerable and sharing stories with other people who want to have this conversation, leading
Yes.
by example, right? We applaud this because it helps us feel good.
Yeah. And I think when I think about the Paralympics, I feel like it does just that. There's something about watching the Paralympics with my children that when you're watching people who are less able bodied than you with various disabilities do things that you cannot do, you haven't even thought of doing, the idea of what's possible in your mind expands so much differently. You know, when you watch able bodied people do amazing things, and again, I'm not taking away from the work of our amazing athletes because it is something else to be a dedicated Olympian, very different than being a professional athlete, which again is a totally different conversation. But when you see, you know, you can chalk it up to hard work or opportunity or this or that. But when you see someone who, you know, can swim with no arms, no legs, and do it way better than I could have ever imagined doing it in my life, it expands your mind in terms of what's possible. And when I get to watch my kids watch that and they see what's possible for themselves and for people around them who are different, they will look at people who are different differently. They will approach people in wheelchairs or various disabilities not with pity or, you know, even empathy. It's just the idea of you have opportunity like me. You have, in fact, different opportunities. You have different superpowers than I do, probably. And I love that open mindedness that it gives, of course, adults, because we could all use a more of a dose of open-mindedness, but it just there's so much hope for that next generation and how they see each other and their differences, not just around disability, but around, their choices with gender and race and all these other culture, religion, to see that there's opportunity in difference.
I think the biggest disservice that we give to ourselves is to say that we're the same.
Mm.
Like, we are so often just trying to fit in. We want to be a part of something. And I just feel like that's just been the societal pressures. That's what kids are experiencing in high school and stuff like that, is they need to fit into certain groups. And the more I practice this and the more I talk about this is no, don't be the one that fits in. Be the one that's not part of the group, because then that's you being you. That's you acting on you. That's you loving you. Right?
Yeah.
One of the things I get all when I give these talks is I ask people to close their eyes. They close their eyes and I'm like, who here is different, looks different, acts different? I just a list of things that could potentially make you different. The purpose is that everybody raises their hand. And then I ask them to open their eyes. And then they
Yeah.
look around, they're like, oh, wow, all of us in this room are different. And then I go off about bullying, because it's like, well, the only reason you're bullying is because you're judging and thinking that they're better than you or you're less than them, or vice versa. But now you can remember, holy, I'm just as different as they are. And then when we can understand how different we are, we can now have a sense of belonging. We can feel the sense of, I love myself more now because I know who I am. I can show love towards them. I'm just going on a rant, but it's
It's
stuff that's
great. I mean, I
important.
think
So
you've found your calling.
yeah,
I could listen to you talk about this because it's true. We need to just have more. And I wouldn't say this is a tough conversation. It might make some people uncomfortable to talk about belonging and loving yourself and, getting comfortable in your greatness. But it does pave the path for a better life. And I don't necessarily mean more successful. Like it's a more comfortable life where you can just show up as you. And I don't know who said it, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's like, you might as well show up as you and be you because everyone else is taken. And think how hard it is to try to figure out who you need to show up as in this moment when you could just spend the time and energy, which would be a lot less than figuring out to be someone else, just be yourself. And
if you
I
want to,
say this trying to take this advice every day, of course, as we're always trying to do better and be better. But I think it's important for people to just embrace their greatness, what makes them unique, and lean into that and be comfortable with it.
yeah, we keep talking, the word success keeps popping up.
Yes.
My view is, if you want to be successful, if you want to feel good, you want to just have this sense of fulfillment, one word: vulnerability.
Ooh, yes. Let's talk about vulnerability. You like
If
that
you,
word. In fact,
oh,
last time we chatted, you used it a lot. And it's, again, I love hearing that come out of the mouth of a guy who's 7'2" talking about vulnerability. So what does that mean to you and how important is it as part of your journey and the work that you do?
like this whole concept, learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That
Yeah.
uncomfortable piece is vulnerability. When you feel like it's, I'm just going to use the examples from yesterday. If you have a brother and sister and they do something and you instantly react, you're not being vulnerable. You're being reactive. Being vulnerable is taking a deep breath and sitting in it and being like, okay, this is
Mm,
really uncomfortable. What can make it feel better? And if the reaction is to yell and scream, I guarantee you're not feeling better, because it's just making things consistently the same. And
yeah.
so, in order to be vulnerable, you stop, you take a deep breath, and you're like, okay, how am I going to feel better? Hey, that hurt. Please don't do that. Hey, mom, can we have you know, when you're a 6-year-old, you're probably not saying, hey, mom, can we sit down and have a conversation with our son and daughter? But same thing applies to our relationships, our partners,
Hmm.
right? I don't know what the statistic is, there's a lot of people having divorces.
Yeah. It's
It's
like over
and
50%. Yeah.
okay, well that's a lot higher than I was totally gonna throw a random number
Yes.
out.
Nope. I'm pretty sure it's over
I
50%.
would I
Yeah.
would put money on it that it's because you're scared to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That you're scared to have the tough question. I will guarantee you every person listening to this podcast has something that they need to say to their partner or a friend but haven't done it because the story they've made up in their head is too terrifying or scary to have. But I will guarantee you when you have it, it might be scary and terrifying, but you will feel better afterwards. That is experiencing vulnerability. It's doing the hard. I had a rant the other day. Suicide, as terrible as it is, it shouldn't happen. It should not happen. And for men, it's an extremely high rate. A brave man talks about his feelings. If you want to be brave, you want to be courageous, talk about it. Because if you don't, that's not being brave. Right? And I'm sorry that I headed this direction, but I've had a few conversations around this recently. When we are said men are tough, what we mean by that is men are tough because they express their emotions, they share, because that is extremely tough. Not sharing is not tough. And it's
Yeah.
just
I
like,
think we struggle being in the discomfort these days. That's why tough conversations are the most important conversations. They create the greatest response or impact. And they're tough because they matter. And to your point around suicide, I mean, so many different schools of thought on this one, being at a mental health crisis, being a mental disease, whatever your views are on it. But the reality is, I do think it starts with this idea of talking and talking about it. And, even before suicide, depression and other mental challenges and crises that people have really, I think, getting those people the treatment they need starts with talking about it, which
mhm.
starts with being vulnerable and creating space for people to be vulnerable. I mean, if you're a man who wants to talk about his feelings, you need to find the right person to do that with who's going to allow you to do that as well. You need to find the safe space. We need to give those people in our lives the right space and grace to be able to be vulnerable and have tough conversations that will lead to the help and support these people need, regardless of what their diagnosis is. So, I agree. There's something in this day and age where we don't want to be uncomfortable. We seek so quickly to find comfort and don't want to sit in things and find a way to really deal with them, which generally is talking about it, reaching out, and realizing we're not alone. That's the one thing about social media that I hope people get from it is, you're not alone. There's probably a lot of people going through what you're going through, and hoping people can find the right community to plug into.
And
I don't
that, yeah,
oh,
sorry. I
go
know,
ahead.
I know that was a really deep thing. I was like, oh man, I shouldn't have maybe gotten into that. But I just want to reiterate what you
Yeah.
just said, the sense of you're not alone. You aren't. The reason why it was
Yeah.
group therapy, there were 7 of us in my group therapy sessions. By the time I shared, and I was typically the one to share last because I always shared first, most of my problems are solved before I even opened my mouth because I realized that the other 6 people, even though the scenarios were different, they were feeling the same way. And that right there gave me a sense of belonging because I knew I belonged in that room because I'm just like them.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time, like a broken record, where there's no trophy for going it alone in life. You need a village. You need your own personal board of directors, to people that are there to support you and that you're there to support. You got to find your people that you can be able to talk with and find common ground with. It makes us all feel like we have the space we need to be ourselves and do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, and of course the people around us, which we tend to prioritize over ourselves a lot of times, but we can't do as good a job as I'm sure as we'd like to unless we take care of ourselves. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but I'm also looking at the time and it has gone by. I want to ask you a few little rapid fire, if you will, but I want to start with leadership because I know you said that you don't really you didn't identify for the longest time as being a leader. And it seems like you've stepped into this role now with your company that you've launched, the Mindful Eat, where you give talks to schools and corporations, doing incredible work. Do you see yourself as a leader now? And how would you define a good leader?
I would, now that we've had this conversation, because I'm just recognizing that I'm just dealing with imposter syndrome every time we talk about leadership. But I think everyone in the world has a story to share.
Yes.
I honestly do. But if you're willing to look at yourself and understand yourself, that's acting in a way of leadership, in my eyes. And I give talks, whether I'm talking to a kindergartner or I'm talking to a CEO of a company, the conversation is still the same.
Hmm.
Maybe the articulation of it is different, but the same points are being put across. It's like,
Yeah.
how can we be a good person? Right? How can we create greatness? How can we show more love for ourselves so that we can extend more love for others? Right? That's all. That's how that's my promotion of the Mindfully. Is I talk a lot about trust, ownership, and integrity, and how when we can align with those, we can create greatness. We can create love within ourselves, and then we're able to extend that out. And it's that whole saying, like, if you're experiencing a lot of drama within, you're going to experience a lot of drama outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a sense of love and belonging, you're going to see that around you. Your relationships are going to be stronger. You're going to have deeper connections with people, right? It's how you treat yourself is how you're treating the world. And I know there's tons of cliches about it, but it's the truth. Yes, life will throw you a curveball, be like, oh, where did that come from?
Yep.
But if you can still practice, to be gentle with yourself, to extend yourself, to love yourself, you're just going to create that around you. And I think I'm good at exploring that with people because I just tell it as it is. I
Yep.
don't need to make it up. You're experiencing it just like I am.
Yep.
My talk the other day was 2 minutes of silence before the talk even started. And guess what? We all felt awkward.
But you all survived.
We all survived, right? So it's just like,
Yeah.
I think there's a real importance to learning to understand and identify who you are.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you're incredible. Side note, you are always incredible. You're always
Yeah.
perfect. Going back to the beginning, what got you here, your experiences, anything like that, are perfect.
Yep.
It's when it doesn't become perfect is when I create a sense of judgment. I'm like,
Yes.
where am I going with this, Greg? What are you
No, I'm
talking
like,
about
we
right
could
now?
just
You killed the
drop the mic
moment. You
now
killed your
and get out of
moment.
here.
Yeah. So, but if you want to create love, you want to feel love, practice it, do it. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is because you already are love, period.
Right. Oh, this is so good. I need to get to one of your talks one day, so we'll arrange that. You're only on the other side of the country, but you're not that far.
It's okay. I'm trying to set it up so I can do more like public talks
Yeah,
at like whether it's
you should.
universities or whatnot, but
Yeah, I
everyone
see that for
matters.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you've taken this platform and you're so humble. And I don't know, if I had gold medals, I'd probably wear them everywhere. There's a good chance that they'd be dangling earrings from my earlobes, although they're very heavy. I have held
I was
some
gonna say
before,
if
but
you wore them as your ears would be like people ask me why aren't you wearing them? I'm like, because they're heavy.
it is
Like
true. I saw I saw Clara Hughes once put her, I think it was like 3 medals. I don't know how many she had, put them on like a small child at an event. And I thought that child was just going to go head
Yeah.
first right into.
Yeah.
But
Like
okay, here's my
each,
question because I ask all Olympic athletes who have won medals, where do you keep your medals?
um, so I just had mine. I gave them to the kids yesterday. So I think they're in my
Oh,
backpack. But I'm going to a shout out actually to Pelican Cases who are sending me
ooh.
a case for my medals as well as some
Oh,
of my
that's
throwing
nice.
equipment. Yeah, so big shout out to them. Thank you for that.
Of
But I
course.
usually keep it on the fireplace mantle.
Okay. So for everyone else to enjoy, because I know there's Felicia George who actually connected us. She's such a sweetheart
Hmm.
and incredible woman. She just said like the medal is for like a moment in time. I've been on this huge Olympic journey for years of my life. It's not the whole story. It's a moment. It's a part of the story. But she goes, this medal brings so much joy to people when they get to see it and touch it and be around it. So that's her favorite part. She goes, I love my medal, don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
sharing it with other people, and I get it, like the goosebumps that I get when it's Olympic time and speaking to Olympic athletes like yourself. Um, I'm a fan. I'm a massive admirer. Okay, rapid fire questions. We're going to go through them quickly. You can
Well,
handle
we'll see. I'm
this.
really good at
You've
going
done
on
much harder
rants. So.
things, I'm sure. Okay, a famous person that you admire.
um, Famous in my eyes, it's my dad.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, he's my
That's a
leader.
very good answer.
He's the person that has led by example my whole life, and he was also a police officer for 40 years, and that to me is
Wow.
somebody who is famous in my eyes. So
Yes. Okay, when you're not out there changing people's lives through your words or doing sports or training, what other type of hobbies do you have?
I like to tinker. I like
To
cars.
tinker.
On
Okay.
June 7th of 2024, I dropped a brake rotor on my toe, split my toe in half, and then I had to compete in nationals 3 weeks later. So that was a challenge. But yeah, so I got to actually compete in Paris with like a broken-ish toe. So,
Oh gosh.
but
I'm
from tinkering,
picturing you under a vehicle. Like I
yeah,
just
I
mm.
agree. I picture it too, and I'm like, that doesn't work. Yeah,
No, it does not work. But I believe you. I do
yeah.
believe you. What is the most Canadian thing about you?
Oh,
I mean, I feel like we got a pretty good sense of it today.
yeah. I don't know. That's a great question. Don't have a clue. I like
Do you
red.
like
I
you like
like
red? Do you like
gold and red.
I would too. Do you like
Hmm.
poutine?
I do. I'm a big
Okay.
man. Come on here. Do I like
Okay.
poutine? I
It
like,
was a trick question.
yeah, yeah. Um, I don't. I think what makes me really Canadian is the fact that my mom's American,
Oh,
and so the more I learn about my mom in America, the more Canadian I feel. Yeah.
fair enough. I get it. What is next for you, Greg? I mean, are you going to compete again? What are your plans? What are you doing?
Yeah. So, what's next for me is to continue working on myself, to
Mm,
continue to move through the challenging times and really love and experience the amazing times. My wife and I recently got married at the beginning of, or
yes.
sorry, the end of September, and so we're going to plan for the family in the future. Like I said, I'm looking at going to do my master's in counseling just to continue to support. But yeah, LA 2028 is also the focus. I'm an older athlete. I'm 38 years old, and just wanting to promote. Um, I'll call it masters athlete,
Ooh, well said.
athlete. Um, yeah, us. I don't want to be us old guys. But yeah, promote health, masters health,
Yeah.
as well as mental health, and just really just enjoy this. Like we're here
Yeah.
once. I'm definitely feeling like a little bit of a midlife crisis because I'm like I'm almost 40 and I'm still an athlete, but I'm like, why not?
As with
I love
children,
it.
don't worry, it gets better. It gets
Yeah,
better.
yeah, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, it has been such a joy getting to know you. I admire so much how you've really used your platform for good, for you and for everyone watching you. And researching you and getting to know you has been such a joy because you have created such good impact through the little things you've done and the big things you've done. And I hope if LA 2028 is on your radar that we see you there, because I'm sure you'll continue to propel your message and do all your good. And I hope our paths cross at some point. Your message is one that I can definitely get behind, as I'm sure a lot of people can. So thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And again, like echoed earlier, thanks for sharing your vulnerability to have these conversations.
Thank you.
Right? I think there's real strong importance about sharing, and if we're able to share, great things happen. So thanks again for doing this.
I agree. Well said. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.